Was live pretty fast
Okay.
before it actually shows. Oh, sorry. We might actually be live now. I think we're live right now. So let's give it just a minute till I can see it on the
Okay.
Facebook side. And I think we might be ready to roll. So we are live, everybody. This is Clark Bradley with Igniting Financial Freedom. We are coming at you this evening, fresh for episode 31. I have a very special guest. I feel like we've been friends forever, although we just met a couple weeks ago. This is Andrew Clarke from Expanding Wallet, bringing him here to you today. And really excited to have him on. We're going to be talking about a few different things pertaining to credit and not what you might think we're going to talk about, because we're talking about ways that your credit can really expand your opportunities and ways that you can use credit to your advantage, and how not all debt is created equal. So welcome to episode 31. Andrew, again, welcome aboard. Glad to have you as an esteemed guest of the Igniting Financial Freedom podcast. And welcome.
Hey, Clark, I am happy to be here. And I feel the same way. It seems like every time we talk, it's like, it's supposed to be a 5-minute conversation. It's like a 20-minute conversation because there's just so much that we have to share. So just really glad now to be able to share with your audience.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, man. And I know there's going to be some good conversation here. And one thing that stuck out to me, I know that I think we're around the same age, and about, what would it be now for me? 20 years ago, almost, reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and seeing it on my dad's bookshelf, and that purple cover, and it just sticking out. And I'm like, what is that? What a weird name, and it caught my eye. And then I read through it and didn't really grasp everything back then, and thinking how your house is not an asset, and how you don't want to be an employee and you don't want to have a secure job, because in reality, being your own business owner and being your own investor and investing in other businesses is actually more secure than just leaving your fate up to an employer for 30 years.
Exactly.
It just was a total mind blow for me,
Yeah, I felt the same. Growing up in a household where my mom would work, really hard. I would watch her work over 100 hours to support our internal family.
Yeah.
And then we had family back in Jamaica who couldn't support themselves. So one income was supporting up to 8 people at a time. And so, she didn't really have time to educate herself about money. And she believed heavily in education. So ironically, when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad at 15, I remember saying to my mom, you remind me of the poor dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so, highly educated. My mom was a teacher for 13 years before coming to the US and basically starting over from the bottom, from scratch.
Yeah.
And then going through school to get educated and become a nurse. And so, I just saw the parallels there. And even when, you asked for something, it was, we can't afford it. And so, that was really, I think, what kind of got her thinking. And so that was kind of what led us then into real estate, because that book was so heavy on real estate investing. And so she actually ended up becoming a real estate agent. And so at 15, 16 years old, I'm actually getting some exposure to real estate through my mom being a real estate agent. And so that's how I started understanding, okay, this is what the MLS is about. This is kind of how you analyze properties and comparative market analysis. So I'm starting to learn all those things at that young age. And then I get my license at 18 and start actually, we talked about this, going through the Robert Kiyosaki investment training and learning how to invest. So, by 18, 19, 20 years old, I'm going through those investment courses. So now at 20, I know how to invest into multifamily homes, invest into apartment buildings, land development, even RV parks. So I gain all this knowledge by 20 years old. So you can imagine then how that's such a change, right? For me, as far as my future, and how I'm acting different, thinking different than most 20-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. So did you kind of just always have that kind of built into you? Is it always a curiosity? Like you see your mom, becomes a real estate agent, and you was it maybe her lead by example, or was it always kind of hardwired?
No, I think that for me, honestly, what it was that it was that mindset that my mom had of hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And, to be truthful to you, it was an aunt that I had who would literally tell me, if your mom keeps working like this, one day she's going to fall over and die of a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
She just can't keep doing this, working that many hours for that long. And so I didn't necessarily care about money, right? I cared about my mom's health. And
Yeah.
so, she didn't have the time to learn, right? And so, and these aren't things that school teaches you, right? Traditional
Yeah.
school doesn't teach us about money. And so my purpose was, well, if I start reading this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, maybe I can learn something to help my mom. So that was my purpose in doing it. And then it opened my eyes up to, hey, this is a better way to make a living. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you had said, don't be just dependent on your employer, right?
Yeah.
Have some multiple streams of incomes and have an income like real estate that you have control over.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. And it was almost maybe born out of necessity, right? For
Right.
you, or out of a desire to provide a different future for
Right.
you,
And
your mom and your family, I like that.
yeah, exactly. And just some background on my mom. I mean, she was raised on a farm with 8 kids. They had 8 kids, including her. So, she knew about hard work, um, and saving money. Like that was, the two things, and eating good food.
Yeah.
Even when she came here, and I was younger, but we didn't have a lot of money back then at
Mm-hmm.
all. She came here back then. This is in the early '90s, working $4 an hour, but we never went hungry. She was very big on always eating good food, and it was easier then too, living in Florida and having being near a swap shop, which is like a farmer's market.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's, I think similar in a way, because for me it was similar but different, I suppose, because my dad, if you read the cash flow quadrant, my dad was always in that S tier,
Okay,
right? The S
self-employed.
square, you know what I mean? And so he was to the point where he was, always kind of in a sales role, a broker and a manufacturer's rep with other big automotive, suppliers and steel companies and stuff like that. And so, could write his own ticket, so to speak, but still had to, show up and
Well,
work, you know what I mean? And couldn't,
exactly.
wasn't in a position to turn the corner, and
Mhm.
then, hire people and create a business and create a company and stuff. And so I kind of saw that as like, hey, well, he got so close and still did really well for my brothers and my mom and all that. And he's still doing it now. But I think it's just what he's always liked to do and what he knows. And so
Right.
I saw that as, I definitely kind of followed that line and went into that same kind of a sales role, at least in the personal finance world, as an advisor. And now just trying to do, kind of like you're doing, right? Helping other people and seeing what we can build,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been helping people before, I started Expanding Wallet, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of like, okay, I have this understanding about money. And one thing that, you'll realize, especially if you go through like a Robert Kiyosaki training, is that while the focus is on real estate, but in order for you to be a real estate investor, you got to have a really, really good understanding of money, like
Yeah.
how to use it, how to move it, understanding of interest rates. And
Right.
so that just gave me a great understanding to where like you can apply that knowledge into so many other areas. And I have a friend who's now gotten pretty famous now. He was actually on the Late Show last month. He's a comedian, and so he made his first like big national debut on the Late Show. And so what people don't realize, and he was viewed like 100,000 views, and people were like, "Where is this guy coming from?" Well, it took 10 years to get there, but part of that was me helping him with his finances, because I said there's going to be opportunities that are going to come, and if you don't get your money in order, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get your credit in order to where your credit cards are freed up, you're not going to be able to travel to go to these places. And so some of those opportunities came, and that's part of what helped him to get discovered. And so, like, I teach people, not just about money to like just be wealthy, but really to be able to position yourself to use your skills
Yeah.
and also go after your dream, right? Like, money is just that tool to help you on the journey. And so that's why it's like, I do talk about money a lot. Obviously, it's important, and I can help you gain the skills to become wealthy, but I
Mm-hmm.
also really want that fulfillment piece, that inspiration.
I was just talking to somebody else about this, and he kind of said something similar in that, yes, the money is important and getting out of debt and building your emergency fund and following a budget. But he's like, the money's just the means. It's a form of exchange. And what does that bring you? What does that give you? What opportunity or what blessing can you give to somebody else or to some charity that you haven't even thought of yet, that you want to create and be the founder of, that you're
Exactly.
passionate about? Maybe it's families in Jamaica that are going hungry. And it's like, dude, this is where my mom's from. I'm going to help them out. And I'm going to have a foundation that I can give $500,000 to every year.
Right.
And that
It's
might
a
light you up.
blessing.
And then it's
Right.
like, how many apartments do I need to buy in order to
Yes.
fund a $500,000 foundation every year? You know what I mean?
Right. And like, that's the blessing is to be able to give, right? Like, you're blessed when you can give, right?
Yeah.
That's a blessing to be able to give. And so, because you mentioned that, you reminded me of something, and this is like, for people, when it comes to money, and and you think money is, if money was really like the root of happiness, then why do you have so many people giving away money once they have it, right? The billionaires of the world. And I sat next to, I used to travel a lot for work before COVID. So before I was 30, I had probably already been on 300 flights. And
Wow.
so I got to meet a ton of people. As my job is in the consulting world. And so I got to meet a ton of people during that time. And one of them was actually a person who inherited a lot of money. His grandfather was the founder of a very, very large company. I won't say what company it is, but it's a multi-billion-dollar company. So, I'm sitting next to this guy who probably is a billionaire or close to it. And it was just really interesting because he was just telling me, by trade, he's a carpenter. But once his grandfather passed away, he inherited so much money, he could just do whatever he wanted. And he chose to actually create a fund where he puts $10 million into that fund every year. And then his only job is just to figure out, okay, which nonprofit am I donating that to?
That's great.
So, right. And I mean, that's what I'm saying is like, money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness, but we need money to do things, right? Schools need to be built, roads, whatever it is, right? And so that's why I say, really focus on that purpose, whatever it is, that big why. Like, what is it going to be that's going to fulfill you, and work at it every day, and get your money in order, right? Educate yourself, fill that gap. And so that's why, I created Expanding Wallet.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And like, I think of, our country as the wealthiest ever. And yet we have some of the highest, if not the highest rates of depression and suicide and obesity and substance abuse and all those things. It's like, we're chasing the wrong dream, chasing the wrong goals, trying to fulfill it with, these earthly things. And for me, it's family and just spending those times on things that really matter instead of what car I'm driving or what house I live in or, those bells and whistles. Right.
Yeah. I think somebody put it in good perspective for me, because we had this talk about, you're chasing after the wrong thing, right? The material things really don't matter that much. And I think it's a combination of things for me, why I'm definitely not very materialistic, but part of it was I wasn't raised that way. Like I said, we couldn't really have those things. I never got a pair of name brand shoes from my mom. It was Payless. It was, barely even had name brand cereal for breakfast. But also, one thing that I will say though, but I did experience a lot of those things, right? Is that as I was traveling and renting cars, right, I started to live kind of this lavish lifestyle and traveling in and out of hotels and got to rent, some really nice cars. And I loved cars. So it was like I got to drive BMWs and Mercedes, but it was interesting because it was like by the end of the week, I was bored. I was ready to go to the next thing. And so I think that's kind of the problem with the material things, that you'll never be satisfied. And, I just realized from all that traveling, like, this isn't fulfilling for me, but I got to experience it. And I think that's the big key is, you're going to chase what you don't have.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's like the thing, but really the problem is it comes down to, you can definitely have all those things, but if you go after a car too early, right, it's going to keep you away from the thing that's maybe most fulfilling for you, And that's like what I was saying with my friend who's the comedian, is he was spending his money on a lot of material things at the time, racking up credit card bills and not being able to even pay them off, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what we were talking about
Yeah,
today,
man.
our topic. And so, I just realized that, hey, at some point you're going to be stuck because you're maxing out your card now. You can't get on a flight to go to New York, right? And
Yep.
that's actually what happened. He got to go to New York and ended up being in a comedy festival where he got discovered by certain people, and it opened up a door for him.
Mm.
So that's why, not everything that I probably do is for everyone. Not everyone's going to have that hunger that I think, that I would say, like, if I were to do a one-on-one, or if I was to work with a small group, like, it's not for everyone.
Right.
I'm going to be very selective if I do end up going down that road. But, once you can understand your money, manage it well, then you can really start opening doors for yourself. Because I say this, there's 3 reasons that we don't go after our big dreams in life. It's that you don't believe you have enough money, you don't believe you have enough time, and you don't believe in yourself. And
Mm.
so, my friend, with his comedy, he believed in himself and he was putting in the time to master his craft. But again, that piece with the money was
Right.
what I saw was going to hold him back, and we took care of that. So those are like the 3 things, that I would love to
I
work
love
with
that.
people on in the future.
Yeah. And I just think of like, when you talk about your buddy and how he was in the position to capitalize on that, going to that show. And I know you mentioned it before when we were talking, how he had to basically, pay out of pocket for a portion of it. And it's like, I wrote down just an idea of like, how many opportunities has, for somebody who's listening, how many opportunities have you maybe missed because you didn't have the cash available, or you were stuck in a job that you didn't otherwise like and you couldn't take the time off, or didn't go to a particular meeting or connect with somebody because you just couldn't or didn't want to, or just didn't feel like it, and it's like, I think about the meetings and the coaching that I've gotten, just business related or real estate related, and it's like the connections I'm making and those opportunities that open other doors. And yeah, so that kind of leads me to the next point of like, you can bring the horse to water, so to speak, but if people don't want to change, like I've got all the tools and training, and I'm sure you do too. It's like, I've got ways that I can help you, but you got to want it. That fire's got to be there, and I'll motivate you, keep you going, but there's got to be some kind of initial spark.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, there's 2 things for success. There's skill and mindset, right? So you are giving them the skills that they need, but if they don't come with the right mindset, they're not going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. That's great. One thing I love, I don't know if you ever listened to the Life Coach School podcast with Brooke Castillo, but she's just like all in the headspace of how you manage your thoughts and your feelings and everything, whether it's money or eating or alcohol or anything, right? Because everything's traced back to a thought, right?
Exactly.
And about overspending and just about what you have and that materialistic drive that is all kind of like, we're all hardwired that way as Americans, at least most of us. I think it might not have rubbed off on you, thankfully, because you had a mother that was an immigrant, which is really good. It's
Yeah.
actually a huge advantage.
You know what?
uh,
Hold on, real quick. I don't want to cut you off, but because you
yeah.
mentioned that, I've told people this, and you said something like that is so huge, because um, I've told people to go to Jamaica, but not for your typical vacation.
Yeah.
Because when I used to go to Jamaica as a kid, I wouldn't see the things that people came back and talked about. I
Yeah.
wouldn't see all the wonderful things, because we would go to visit my grandma, and on the way up there, I'd see all the poverty around her.
Yeah.
And she lived on a farm, so there really wasn't a whole lot around her. And so, that gave me a lot of perspective on life. And so I would say, go to the poor parts of Jamaica,
Yeah.
go outside of the tourist areas, stay in those areas if you can, or at least just drive by it and visit, and talk to some of the people there. Because one thing that stood out to me was, I went to school for an engineering degree. And I remember on one trip, the taxi driver said he had an engineering degree. And this is while
Hmm.
I'm going to school. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, there's no jobs here for engineers. There's no opportunity. Still got to feed my kids. So I'm driving a taxi.
Mm.
And so that just gives you so much perspective, right? An opportunity, and not wasting it when you have it.
Yeah.
right? And so that's why I say, you know, one of the best things you can do, one of the best investments is to travel to get a different perspective of the world. Because in America, there you do have a lot of opportunity, but the problem is the opportunity is only open to those who have the knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the gap, right? You got the gap is really the knowledge gap. And
Yeah.
so that's what, you know, you and I are trying to fill. But, you know, until people really get that perspective, get the drive, they're not going to like come to us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so what she basically says is this Brooke Castillo that I was mentioning, her whole thought of how you keep your possessions in the right perspective is that, you know, for example, I've got a old minivan, and at the time I loved it when we bought it. I was like, oh, this thing's so nice. It fits all the kids. It's got the stow and go seats. And now after like driving this thing for 5 years, I noticed like it's like sitting in an airplane when you're on the highway. It's so loud. It's just like, you know,
I know that feeling.
the AC's broken, and it's like the third time we've got the AC fixed, and it's like every time it's a new piece of the AC, so it's not covered under the previous warranty, and we're just like, screw it, we're just gonna bake in here, we're just gonna sweat a little bit. But I'm like, listen to one of her podcasts one time, she's basically saying like, every time that you're feeling, you know, ungrateful or resentful or wishing you had a new car, go back to the day you bought that car and pretend like today is the day that you just bought that car. How excited were you when you just got that brand new car? Even though it was a 2010 nasty silver minivan, I was like so jacked when I first got it, because it was like, it was smooth, it had the you know, automatic doors that come out, the kids hop in, you know, all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And it's like all those nice features. It has the DVDs behind I'm like, dude, talking to my kids, like, we did not have TVs in our car, you know, when we were growing up and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and they're
That
complaining
was
about
decked out.
what videos we're watching, you know. And anyway, so
Right.
it's like that dose of perspective and of gratitude that just
Exactly.
keeps that at bay, you know. And that's,
It's
I
so
don't know, that's
powerful,
helped me.
man. Yeah, it's so powerful. And and that whole thing about perspective too, and I totally can relate to the car, the van, or the van you had, because you know, one of the things that a lot of people talk about is me buying property at 24, but the thing that it
Mm-hmm.
required me to do was to hold off on buying a new car.
Yeah.
So I had my same high school car that I had from the age of 16, still had that car. So it was like when I graduated, a lot of people were buying brand new cars, but I just knew at that time, and I had a budget, you know, sheet and everything. And I just knew that I had a choice to make. I
Yeah.
could either buy a new car or buy a property. I couldn't do both. And so, you know, I understood cash flow, and hey, if I can increase my income through a rental,
Beautiful, man.
eventually I can buy a new car. But I can tell you, Clark, I was made fun of. I
Yeah.
was, you know what I mean? Because that car started to rust. It was just, when you talked about the bumpy like a plane, man, I am telling you, we got some bad potholes in Minnesota after the winter time.
Yeah, we do too in Michigan, man. All that ice and
Oh yeah, you
ice and
know
snow.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So I used to think sometimes, like, I would just have to stop and just think like, this car tire has got to be blown, because it happened to me once. The
Yeah.
tire blew out on me
Yeah.
on the highway. But you know, that was it. Really, is like, you got to have delayed gratification. You got to sacrifice, you know, to some extent. And it was definitely worth it, because you know, it was tough for those 2 years. I was really broke. I mean, no joke about it, right? We can talk about emergency funds and all that. I was definitely broke because I borrowed money to renovate the duplex. And
Yeah.
so I was literally paying $1,000 a month, right, to pay off this debt that I borrowed. And so that would have, you know, that could have been car money, but I just was like,
Yeah.
you know what, if I can hustle and just, you know, stay focused for 2 years, you know, then I'll have all this debt gone, cash flow in my pocket, and now I can buy a new car. And you know, that's what I did. It was supposed to be 18 months, but car gave a little bit of trouble, and
Yeah.
couldn't make all those payments. But you know, when you understand credit, you can move the money or the
Right.
debt. You can even move the debt around. And so that's all I did. I moved the debt to another place, another credit card, basically, where it had a 0% offer, and then
Yeah.
it gave me more time to pay it off.
Well, it's a perfect segue. And I think too, like, you know, if we can kind of, you know, go back to the 24-year-old version of you, right? Like, were you
Yeah.
kind of, was your mind made up for a while that you were going to
Yeah.
pursue real estate, just, you know, at the expense of a lot of other things? And where,
Yeah.
I maybe I
think
already
so.
know what you're going to say, but where did all that come from? Was it just kind of a continuation from, you know, your mom is a good influence getting into real estate, and
It
how
was
did
a
that all kind of,
combination of, it was a
yeah.
combination of all of it. Rich dad, poor dad. my mom, the investment courses. The thing is like, I knew too much, right?
Yeah.
I knew too much to start spending my money on liabilities, right? I knew that, hey, if I focus on building assets, right? If I focus on building assets, one day, I'll be free to make the choices of, hey, do I really want to keep working a job? Do I want to retire? I was actually considering making like a video on, here's like a 20-year retirement plan. You
Yeah.
could even do it in 10, right? But in my mind, I was doing it all on my own, right? If you have a wife or a partner who also has an income, that could be a 10-year retirement plan if you're both, focused and on the same page. I think
Sure.
that I was also married and divorced. We were definitely not on the same page when it came to money. But that's okay, though, because I think that, again, this isn't something we learn in school. And so it was just one of those things where it was like, hey, let me teach you. And, for a while, I wasn't listening. But after we got divorced, she listened and she's doing well with her own property.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you took what you learned from the property at 24, and I know part of our topic is about, just how to use credit to your advantage. So maybe you can speak to that too. I know you kind of talked about it for a second there.
Yeah. So let me break that down. So basically, when you buy a property, you can get like loans on that property. You can get renovation loans, and they'll tie it to your mortgage. And the problem is that, you got compounding interest on that, right? And so my whole thing was that I wanted to own this property for a long time, and I did not want to be in long-term debt. And, maybe, some people might say one way or another, but at that time, my thinking was that way. And, kind of coming from kind of the immigrant mindset of get out of debt, don't have debt, but my mindset was, if I can get 0%, right? I'm always shooting for 0%. Even when I buy a car, 0%, wait till it falls so I can get 0%. And so what I looked at and what you learn is a lot of creative financing, right? Don't just run to a bank. There's other ways around it. And so my focus when I was in my early 20s and even 18, 19, get a credit card, right? Start building credit. And so I started building up my credit because that was something that I knew was going to be important to save money on the loan. But then also, if I had a higher credit score, I could get better credit offers, right? I could get better offers from credit cards and also higher limits. Right. And so, so when I bought that property, I think I just timed it kind of around like perfectly to where I got $18,000 on a credit card, or I used $18,000, I should say. It was one of those promotionals, 0% APR on all your purchases. So I purchased the materials for the house. Some of the people that did some of the renovations, like putting in AC units, I could pay those larger companies with a credit card. And then smaller guys that I hired, I would, have to pay them out of my money. But that was really the main thing that I did there, because if you think about, you go to a bank and you try to borrow $18,000, interest rates are higher then, but even now, right? $18,000 with compounding interest, it's going to probably cost you, probably a couple hundred, maybe in a few thousand by the time you pay that off, right? And you're going to be fighting against interest with those payments, right? So I didn't have to fight with interest. So that's why, I guess it's good that I learned how to work hard through my mom, even though I want to work smarter, not harder, but, there are times when working hard makes a lot of sense. And I just didn't want to do it, for 20, 30, 40 years. Sure. But, that was kind of my mentality back then.
Yeah. And so that was the first duplex you bought, right? And you still live there, or did you move on since then?
No, so I still live here. I was going to buy another property last year. But the reason I didn't buy the property was I was also launching the business, and I was going to launch this business a few years before that, but then I had gotten into another real estate deal where we were flipping a property. Yeah. And I just remember like that experience went so bad that I just, because of a terrible contractor who basically was a scam artist. And so that experience just kind of gave me a bad taste in my mouth. And I was like, I said to myself, I got to pick one. And I picked choosing the business because I have the real estate knowledge. mean, I can walk into rooms with any real estate expert, and I have the knowledge, right? So
Yeah.
I can always do a real estate deal. And I use other means now, or I guess I'm more of like a silent investor to still invest in real estate, because right now my time is my most important asset. That's always the most important asset, but it's being put into the business.
Sure.
Mhm.
And so for somebody that's, let's say, interested in trying this, right? And one of the popular terms that you hear a lot is a house hack, right? Or a if you subscribe to any like Bigger Pockets or any of that,
Yeah,
they'll
Bigger
talk about a
Pockets is
burr, right?
great.
Where
Yep.
you buy the property and fix it up and then rent it out. Um, what would you say to somebody who's interested in that, but they're maybe concerned that, maybe we've had a long run here of the real estate market. Should
Yeah.
I wait? And these are not my sentiments, but these are the objections that I hear a lot too. It's like, oh, well, whether it's the real estate market or the stock market, it's like, well, hey, we've had a 11-year, 12-year run. I'm going to just wait,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough one. I can't say that, I have my opinion on the real estate market. I think there will be a dip. I mean, in my
Yeah.
opinion, I think there definitely going to be a dip for multiple reasons. But, one is if interest rates rise, like, right, a lot of people who are looking out there to buy are going to be kind of knocked out of the game, or going to have to scale back.
Yeah.
And so, then there's less competition, right?
Right.
So, that's one. But I would also just say, you got to look at it too from a numbers perspective,
Right.
right? And so the price is one thing, the house price is one thing, but in Robert Kiyosaki's book, one thing he focused on heavily was cash flow, right?
Yeah.
Let's forget about the price of the house, run the numbers and see, hey, when the tenant pays you rent, will it cash flow? Okay. Or will it eventually cash flow in like the near future? Or how much are you having to pay out to cover it, right? Because let's just say, go back to, okay, let's say I'm 24 now or 23, I'm looking for the house at 23, right? So my thinking would be, what's it going to cost me for rent? Okay. If it's going to cost me $1,000 for rent, but let's say I buy a property, I'm not going to cash flow. Let's say I'm going to eat $200 a month, right? So I'm potentially saving $800 a month. And you got to save something, because the biggest downfall of real estate, as opposed to renting, is the responsibility. And then also, the responsibility of having to manage the property. But the other thing is, what do you do for emergencies, right? And so that's the big thing. I can tell you that first year was rough. I don't think I ever had that many issues owning the property as I did the first year. And it was like the time when, you have the least amount of money and the most amount of things happen. There was a plumber tried to rob me basically of $10,000.
Yeah.
Luckily, I just knew a former general contractor who came over and told me, no, your piping is okay because it's close enough to the main drain.
Yeah.
And so it's just like those little things, right? And so I think it just comes down to maturity as well. You got to have that maturity, that mindset, have enough knowledge to get into it. But I don't think that it's necessarily a bad time if the cash flow makes sense, if you can save enough back for emergencies. Because again, you still have good interest rates. That's kind of the other thing. You have good interest rates. And then there is one thing that I've recently learned about from my mortgage friend, and you can do something called recasting a loan. And I thought that was actually a really interesting concept where, okay, you get in at a low interest rate, you buy the house high, but let's say, a couple of years from now, you get a big bonus, you get a nice tax return, you got a lot of cash, you can put that cash into the house, and then they'll recalculate out the amortization on the property, and now your monthly payments go down.
Yep.
So your cash flow can really come up. The downfall is you're going to extend out the life of the loan.
Right. Yeah. So it's not quite a refinance.
No.
And I know
It's a
when
way
I
around
was in
it.
the banking world, that clients would come in on occasion and they'd, want to chunk down $50K or something on their balance. And
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. It's a recalculation of basically of the new remaining balance
Yeah. So
over
it's
either an
it's
extended
definitely,
term or maybe the same term.
Yeah, and if I remember right too, it costs less than a refinance. Refinance,
Mm-hmm.
you can pay thousands to pay down the
Yep.
pay
Yep.
points down and stuff.
So what resources did you use, or maybe connections that you made that were key, you think? Because I'm thinking of the person that's listening that's maybe got some cash set aside, or they want to pursue real estate or even starting a business, and you know what would you say to them? Maybe they've got some money set aside, or they can put a little bit away each paycheck or something towards something, and where's
Bigger
the
pockets.
yeah.
I really personally like, because when you mentioned that, that just made me smile, because I would listen to Bigger Pockets like religiously.
Yeah.
The podcast, I would read the articles, I would go in there and look at their calculations.
Yeah.
And mind you, I was creating my own spreadsheets too, but it's always good to learn and leverage off of people with experience. So I would say Bigger Pockets is one. If you're going to start your own business, learn about, there's so much to learn, honestly. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm really glad I didn't buy another property, because this was definitely a larger undertaking than I expected. And I have a background in consulting, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
still a consultant, actually. So, I've traveled and worked for multi-billion-dollar companies, but, to build your own company is a different ballgame, especially now. There's
Yeah.
so many aspects to it when it comes, and I'm not just talking about, the core of your business, but then the marketing, the social media, the emails that
Mm-hmm.
you, so it's like you have to learn all these skills or you have to hire someone.
Yeah.
And so I learned about email marketing through learn.com. That's Anik Singh's company. He's
Okay.
one of the best email marketers in the world. So, that's a good resource. He's got YouTube videos. He does more interviews but his website, learn.com, great resource for making money on online in general.
Yeah. That's cool. I
Mhm.
will I will mention to you as well that I would take a look at Flip Lifestyle if you haven't already, in
Okay.
terms of creating an online business and particularly creating a membership
Yeah, you mentioned that
stream of
last time, but
income.
I would, right.
Um, my wife's had quite a bit of success doing that, creating her business, and mine starting this as well. They are a wealth of knowledge. It's a couple from Kentucky, and they've got that southern twang, and they're just good down home people. You know what I mean? It's like somebody you'd like to just sit and have a drink with and just chat with. Like just good people. Family people. So
Yeah.
I'll put both of these in the notes for everybody, and I will second your notion on Bigger Pockets without a doubt. I've been listening to. I started listening to the main one, then I listened to the Real Estate Rookie podcast for a while, and then I've been listening to the Money podcast just because it's so much in kind of my lane of
Mhm.
people call in, and it's kind of got that Dave Ramsey feel where people call in and they ask for help, and they kind of critique their kind of like a cross section of where they're at with their money, and kind of
Yeah.
diagnose it, which is really cool.
I love that. And also, there's articles too that I have on Expanding Wallet on the website. On expandingwallet.com, there's definitely one article that I think would be really useful for anyone thinking about, starting an online business,
Cool.
which was, I broke down the cost of a lot of the essentials that you're going to need. And maybe you won't even know that you need some of them. So, because that's just, something that, I was just like a little surprised about when I started. And it was like, shoot, I need that too. Okay, and I put it in the format at the end of, hey, this is a budget, here's how you budget. And that's literally what I go to. And when you start a business, and I talked to someone who got a lot of venture capital money and
Mm-hmm.
made a lot of mistakes, blew $500,000.
Ooh.
And he was like, I don't know what to do. I blew $500,000. And that's like, hey, you know what? You've never started a business in your life. You're going to make mistakes,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately, it's not your money, it's someone else's money, but you're going to make mistakes. That's
Yeah.
part of the game. And so, having a budget is really important. And a lot of people get into business and the money starts coming in, but they don't understand money still. It's no magic that happens when you just get a business. It's not
Yeah.
like flip switches. And so for me, yeah, I had people that I was doing social media for me, and I was paying them about, I think, $200 a month. And I was just like, you know what? These posts, I don't like them. We don't even review them. You just post stuff. I'm seeing things I don't like. I'm having to delete things. It's just not, it doesn't make sense, right? And so that's part of life and part of business. So just keep that in mind. I would say if you start a business.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff, man. And I think too, like, it's it's tough to subscribe and like kind of put your faith in certain people in these like I think that's a lot of the reason why Bigger Pockets was born, because you have some of these experts, and certainly not all of them are misleading, or
Mhm.
dishonest, but you have some of these people out there that just try to get your money, and it's like Bigger Pockets was kind of like that ground roots
Yeah, I
built
love it.
community, and it's like it's powered through all the people in the forums,
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of the knowledge comes from. And that's why I like, these guys that Flip Lifestyle so much, because they built several membership based businesses, and now their forums are to the point where it's like that, where there's just it's guided by that kind of, in a good way, that mob mentality, where it's like there's so many people giving you support and guiding you that it's not just some guru claiming to know everything.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you learn from everywhere, right? I mean, you take some from, you can take some from Robert Kiyosaki, you can take some
Mm-hmm.
from Bigger Pockets, right? There's not like one source knows all, and then you can put together your own plan. And one of the things that really caught me by surprise when I part of why I started Expanding Wallet is I look at what's available today compared to when I was 15, 16, even in
Mm-hmm.
my early 20s. And I'm like, wow, there's so much opportunity, right? But then you look at the statistics that are showing, and this happened before COVID, there's a trend that more and more people were living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw recently now we're up to 58% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, right? So
Wow.
over half of America. And so that's what's scary, right? It's like right now people are blind to what's available to them. I don't
Mm.
know if it'll be available. I don't know what'll happen, 10 years from now, but it's available right now. And so when I talk about the technology, for instance, when I talked about being a silent investor, right? There's apps where I can invest into real estate, right? Apartment
Right.
building.
Right.
And so also like retirement, right? You were a former financial planner. And
Mm-hmm.
so you understand the fees involved, right? Well,
Oh
there's
yeah.
robo advisors available, right? So I can put money there and I can get, be charged way less in fees, and my money is working for me.
Yep.
Okay. If I'm busy, there's apps that can invest more directly into stocks again for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I don't have the knowledge. So I'm just looking at this like, wow, because at 18, I was also involved in stocks. I was swing trading and eventually lost a lot of money because of the crash in
Mm-hmm.
2008. But again, I'm just like, holy cow, you had to have like $1,000 to open an account. You can get a Robinhood account for free,
Yep.
right? And so it's just like the access is there, but the problem too is, one, it's the vision to see that, okay, I need to get in this, but then what do you do once you get in it, right? Like Robinhood is a little dangerous because it is so easy to get in, but if you don't have kind of that knowledge to know what to invest in, it can be dangerous. But uh, there's just so much knowledge right now. It's amazing. YouTube, the things that are out there. So
I heard a guy. So the reason I mentioned that about your mom being at almost an advantage as an immigrant, because she hasn't been brainwashed by our kind of our materialistic,
yeah, it
society.
could be.
I read a book by this guy. His name's Brian something. He's from Ireland, and he wrote a book called The Immigrant Edge. And it's basically just that, like those first generation immigrants who know what it's like not to live here and came from probably a worse off place. I mean, I guess unless you probably came from like England or somewhere else that's like kind of like the same, the
Right.
same
Yeah.
demographic, socioeconomic, whatever. But most of the time, they're coming here with such gratitude and such a like wide-eyed just lens of opportunity that it's like anything they do is just better than what it was back home. And they, of course, they're trying to make something for themselves and give some prosperity to their family and all that good stuff. And so that book was just, it was great.
Yeah, no,
That's what that
I
reminded
think
me
it's a
of.
good point. The weird thing about my mom though is, sometimes she actually questions the decision because, she was actually in a good place, even though, Jamaica's third world country and not that many opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
She was a teacher there for 13 years, but she had paid off her house. before coming here, and she was actually doing pre-law. She was going to go back to school to be a lawyer.
Nice.
So it was just interesting, and this is like really the interesting thing. You think like, okay, well, you got all that going for you. Why did you come here? The appeal to come to America is so big when you're from a third world country. I mean, it's enormous. And so I don't think, that might not be something that people realize, but like a lot of other countries really want to emulate America, and the, what America is like this amazing place, right? And so, you still come here and you think like, okay, I'll work hard for a while. I think that was my mom's thinking, and everything's gonna just, be good. But no, right? There's a lot of work, and so it's still, you can have both. You could have that crazy hardworking lifestyle, or you can kind of get this lifestyle where you grow some wealth and you become free. But it's that knowledge gap again that she lacked. And so that was really interesting, because it's like we'll have family members who will just call and ask her like for money, and it's like, what do you think, this money just grows on trees here? No, I've got to work really hard to get it. So it's definitely interesting that you mentioned that. What's that book called?
It's called The Immigrant Edge. I'll put that in the show notes as well. I think it's immigrant though with an E, as in like you've emigrated here.
Oh, that's clever.
Edge. Brian something. He's an Irish guy, and he's like a motivational speaker and a coach and stuff like that. He's got a podcast as well. Good stuff. So I was going to ask you, what do you think kind of made the difference for you? When you're kind of at the point where you're like, okay, I'm about to buy this building, right? Because most people probably get freaked out, right? I'm going to buy this duplex.
Knowledge.
What? Yeah. Okay. So was it knowledge? What did you have? Did you have any people that you were kind of leaning on for perspective and for guidance and for motivation? Or
I think I had that through like those coaches through the Robert Kiyosaki group. I wasn't connected with them at that point, but I had just because those were in person, right? Those were like in person, and you could ask a bunch of questions. So I would just, hammer their heads with questions. And the one thing that I would say, if you're new, spend the time to really put together a good team. Find a good, honest mortgage consultant. That was like what scared me, because like I said, I was a real estate agent during all this fraud that was going on in that industry. And so the guy that I ended up picking was like, I wasn't even looking for someone at that point, and we just happened to meet, and we talked about, there's a lot of actual spiritual stuff that we talked about in religion. And when he told me he was a mortgage person, and we talked a little bit more, and I was like, okay, you're a mortgage consultant. You know what? I am going to buy a house next year. I'm not ready right now, but I'll give you a call, and you're going to be my mortgage guy. Cool. And so that was just kind of like, random by luck, I guess. But spend the time to really research the people you work with, and kind of like back to that story I told you about when we flipped a property. But the problem is I got a referral from a friend who I kind of looked up to him as kind of my mentor or big brother, because he was my real estate agent on my first property. And he was about, I want to say he was about 2 or 3 years older than me. And he was doing real well, flipping properties right and left. So, he recommends this guy to me, and he says how great he is. And I'm thinking he's used him on some of his properties. Well, he was in the middle of a property using that guy as well. And so the guy definitely knew his stuff. I had worked with contractors before, and I questioned him, and, he knew his stuff. But the problem is that he didn't really have a crew, I think. And he was so good, I think, at getting business that he realized, well, I can just take your money and your money and your money and your money. And he took all these people's money. And then he got into some trouble with the law. He went to jail. And we were trying to like figure out what was going on. I think actually he was going to be deported. That was it. Because apparently he was an illegal immigrant. Been here for over 20 something years. We had no clue, right? And we found out that he was using a subcontractor's license to pull the permits. Because some of our work started to not get done. And we're like, I'm calling my friend. I'm like, is your work getting done? No. Is your work getting done? Have you heard from him? And so we ended up finding out, and it was just a nightmare, because now the subcontractors, and here's how we knew he was pulling a big scam. The subcontractor comes to us, who we had never met. We just happened to like run into each other when I was checking on the property. And he said, well, he hasn't paid us. And I was like, well, how can that be? We paid him like thousands of dollars. Well, he said that you guys hadn't paid him, right? And so, here's probably the biggest problem in America too is, if somebody robs you thousands of dollars to do a job, they can get away with it pretty easily versus somebody trying to rob to eat, or
Yeah.
feed their kids, unfortunately. And so that was really the shocking thing because I talked to attorneys. I talked to actually the Attorney General's office, talked to the FBI. I don't live too far away from the FBI's office. So it was just, it has to be a big enough case. Well, I know through the subcontractor that his license was used to pull 8 permits. Most of them he didn't know about those houses, and people are calling him. And so, all I could say was, well, this guy had 8 jobs, probably did equal to about $1 million because that's what you need for the FBI to jump on that case. But again, I don't know those people. So, that was really frustrating. We are able to cover those losses through tax. There's certain tax things my accountant informed me about. So, so we ended up taking a loss on that property because of that. And so I learned a great lesson, right, in real estate investing is that, it's much harder to find another general contractor to come in and clean up someone's big mess and to find a good one up front.
Yeah.
So that property took me a long time to get it, get it finished and on the market. But, you learn through your journey, right? And your failure, success, whatever. I don't really necessarily say that, it's a failure from the financial side, but, there's so much that I learned from that one experience. And if any of you guys listen to Bigger Pockets, Clark and I have, there's always like a few investors who come in and they've done a bunch of deals and they're like, you're always going to get like burnt on 1 or 2 deals. Hopefully it's never your first, that's what they always say. Someone's going to come in and burn you, unfortunately.
No, I'm actually dealing with that right now. I think I mentioned when we first talked, we're building out a co-working office business in my town here, and just had a flooring guy come up, had a bunch of estimates that I had to get for vinyl plank and some carpet to put in, and got an HVAC guy coming back out. And then as soon as I get the final go ahead with the city for the building permit, then we'll get our general contractor up in there and start cracking away at all that. But I get it, man. And all of the blessing too, though, I think what I was getting at too is the question for you is like all the contractors that I've reached out to, most of them anyway, and like the key players were all referrals. We're all like, hey, you got to talk to this one. This guy's the best in town. This girl's the best in town. Like my real estate attorney, my mortgage guy, my like all those people, like my contractor, right? All those key players, my real estate broker, stuff like that, are just like,
I think that's like fine. Like the biggest thing was that my friend hadn't actually used him from a project start to finish.
Yeah.
Like that was the big problem because he never finished any jobs.
Yeah.
That was like the big kicker. And so, the funny thing is the next project I did was remodeling a bathroom. And I spent about 2 months, Clark. So I spent 2 months on finding a contractor. I'm going to tell you what I did, because after being burnt like that, dude, I not only did I get the bids, I called some referrals. Dude, I told the one guy that I was like, I really like him. I found out his office is a few minutes from my house. I'm like, at least I know where to find him.
Right.
And we met at his office one time, and I told him, after being burnt like that, I want to see your work that you're doing right now. So like, if you have a project that you're doing a bathroom, I want to see it. If you got a project where you're doing a house, I want to see something that's almost done. I want to see something that's in progress.
Yeah.
And so, that's what took a while. Was I wasn't in a rush. I understood like it's much harder to get out of things than to get in them. So
that's so good, man.
Yeah. So I ended up going to these houses that he was working on. He got the permission from the owner. And actually the nice thing was the owners were there and they said a lot of good things. My uncle, he's from Jamaica. He happened to be visiting, and he is a big time construction person and builds houses, apartment buildings, hospitals. And I said, hey, uncle, do you want to come check out these construction guys that I'm thinking about using and see their work? And he's like, oh yeah. He's ready, because he's like, man, I hate when guys take shortcuts and I'm going to find their shortcuts. And he said, you need to work with them. They are good. They didn't
Yeah.
take any shortcuts. And here's the best part, Clark. Their bid was the lowest. Their
Oh,
bid came in
nice.
the lowest. I would have used them either way, but their bid was significantly, well, maybe I shouldn't say the word significantly, but it was significantly lower than the highest one. I got 3. And theirs, between theirs and the highest one, was almost $10,000 difference.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about too before maybe we wrap everything up is 2 things. First question is, are you going to buy another investment property, and will it be a duplex? Where do you think you're going from here in the real estate world? And then I'll follow up in a minute with my second one.
It depends on how I do it. Like, so there could be some apartment buildings. There could be some apartment buildings. Like I said, I kind of have some more like silent deals, silent partnerships, or crowdfunding, I guess you could call it that too.
Yeah.
But if I do a direct deal, it may be apartment buildings. I'm okay with still doing duplexes. I'm still fine with doing duplexes. The biggest thing is really just going to be dependent on the business and where it grows.
Bless you.
Sorry. But yeah, it all depends on where the business kind of goes, and freeing up some time to really focus on that, because anytime you get into real estate, that is a huge endeavor.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing I wanted to ask, is I mentioned it briefly in the intro, was the difference is that, or I should say, how not all debt is created equal. And from both of us kind of being cut from that rich dad poor dad cloth, right? Depending on what teacher you listen to and how you were kind of raised in the personal finance world and what you subscribe to, right? I don't know if you can speak to that too, but just there's differences of thought, and of opinion on that.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about Dave Ramsey, kind of get out of debt, versus Robert Kiyosaki will say maybe get into debt, but good debt, And so what does that mean? And so good debt is when I get a duplex, right? When I bought the duplex, why I bought that over a car was because that was going to be good debt, right? That was going to put money in my pocket over the long term. And then when you can accumulate good debt, and we call those assets, they appreciate in value. Plus, even better is if they actually kick out cash to you. So a duplex kicks, or whatever, real estate where you have a rental that's kicking out cash flow. You could even invest in stocks and get dividends. That's again cash flow coming into your pocket. And then a business, another investment where it's a huge investment, but again, once your business starts to kick out cash, and you don't necessarily always have to be there, right? That's the passive income. That's a good investment.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. I think that's we'll wrap it up right there, man. That was well said. So,
all right.
Any parting words of wisdom or anything you want to share with the listeners that you think might be worthwhile or noteworthy?
Yeah. So, I had mentioned to you, I created this 5 Keys to Success guide. It's a PDF guide that you can download on my website. And, we talk about finance. Clark and I both talk about finance. And, for me, like I said, it's just money is just like a tool to get you to where you need to be on your journey. And the most important thing for me, I would say, that I put out there is that guide. Even though there's a bunch of articles out there about finance, we've done workshops on money, but I say that because when I look back on my life from being a young kid, who was laughed at when I read. I was laughed at when I read by the way I pronounced certain words. And then I was not a good reader when I was young. I wasn't good. And I wasn't good in school. And at one point I was a full year behind in school, behind in reading, put in special ed. And, there's things in that guide that I share, because one of the most important things was having purpose. It was when I saw the sadness in my mom's eyes after failing an exam, a social studies exam, and I really didn't know why, but now I know why. The sacrifices she made to come to this country, and for her kid to be failing in school. And remember, education was like, really big for her. And so it gave me a purpose to make her proud. I didn't necessarily really fully understand the value in school at the time, but that changed my life. I ended up not only being ahead in reading after 2 years, of working with this special education teacher. And, obviously I put in the work, but I excelled in almost every class after that.
Awesome.
And graduated high honors in high school, and then went on to earn the hardest degree at the University of Minnesota with over 50,000 students. So, when
So the
you think
flame was
about
lit, huh? The fire was
yeah,
lit.
yeah. And so, I talk about, the power of purpose. I talk about how do you incorporate these things into your life, these 5 keys to success that I would say have helped me to transform my life in multiple areas. When you look at, what happened with the money situation, right?
Yeah.
There are certain things that had to happen in order for me to kind of change the course of maybe my family, right? Or maybe even generations after, because now I'm creating generational wealth. And then for me to create Expanding Wallet, I hated public speaking. I feared it. That was like the worst thing in the world for me. So even to do interviews and to speak publicly, I probably spoken in front of 1,000 people virtually, at least, in the last few months alone, through my workshops, through the public speaking courses I've been in, including working with the #1 motivational speaker in the world, Les Brown, and then a friend of mine who's also a world-class speaker. Yeah. And so that's the most powerful thing that I would say that I could give to anyone, and I'm giving away for free. So like, definitely get that, because, whatever you're dealing with now, whatever the situation is, if you can focus your mind, if you can, build habits, daily habits into a routine, that's going to help with that mindset. And then it will build belief. And then you start taking action.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see this, I talk about this in the guide, these 3 words right here: learn, believe, grow. And so this is like my catchphrase. I always say at the end of my videos, learn all that you can, believe in yourself, and take actions that allow you to grow. Because like, that's what makes me, I would say, or makes anyone unstoppable, if you can master those 3 things.
Awesome. Amazing. What is that URL for everybody?
Expandingwallet.com/success.
Awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes as well for everybody who's listening. And SUCCESS is the end of it. Andrew, it has been a pleasure, man. I'm excited to see where this business takes you. Your energy and your enthusiasm is contagious, and I know you're just destined for great things, man. I'm excited to just see where this goes, and we'll stay connected over the years, man. And we'll do this again for sure. And
absolutely.
Do something again together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for you too. I definitely want you to keep me posted on how the office goes. Having a physical space is a big deal, especially right now with COVID. But I have a lot of belief in what you're doing, because I can tell that you're passionate about it and your heart's behind it. So others will follow.
Good stuff, man. Awesome. All right. So let's see. That puts us number 31, episode 31 in the books. Thank you for listening to the Igniting Financial Freedom podcast. Again, this was Andrew Clarke from Expanding Wallet. That is all for us tonight. And I do appreciate your time. We'll catch you on the flip side.